All right, we're back with another expanded root cause analysis. This time we're looking at potential root causes of a new DC activation gone wrong. If you're planning on a new build, whether it's a greenfield or brownfield, or even an expansion, you want to stay tuned for this one. Now, for those who don't yet follow us on LinkedIn, this expanded continuous improvement series is an extension of our Fishbone Friday content that we publish on our LinkedIn page and on our blog each week. Fishbone Friday is a weekly deep dive into potential root causes for some of the biggest and most costly challenges in warehousing and order fulfillment today. We're now releasing the series here on YouTube for the purpose of exploring the root causes in a bit more detail. So for those who are new to this, a fishbone diagram is also known as an Ishikawa cause and effect diagram. It's a popular and proven method of root cause analysis, typically focusing on 6 categories within a business, or in this case, a distribution operation. The 6 categories are people, equipment, process, environment, management, and last but certainly not least, tools. It's an important brainstorming exercise for both executives and operators to be familiar with because it creates discussion and transparency around all potential failures, either on the surface or when it comes to an underlying process that's deeply ingrained within an operation. So, whether you're looking to proactively isolate potential causes of failure for an upcoming important project, or you're looking to find the root cause of an ongoing challenge in your day-to-day operation, a fishbone diagram is a great tool to have at your disposal. Before we get into the topic for the day, if you don't yet follow us on LinkedIn, do make sure you head over to our page after this video to check it out. We'll put the link in the description below. Fishbone Friday is just an example of the helpful and actionable content we're posting there each and every week. Also, we do host invite-only webinars from time to time, exploring all things fulfillment optimization. So the best way to get in on those is to follow our page as well. Of course, we're now here on YouTube. So if you found this video to be helpful, be sure to give the video a like and also subscribe to our page if you'd like to receive notifications each time we post something new. We're trying to do this each and every week. So make sure you do press that subscribe button to make sure you don't miss anything moving forward. A quick note about our last edition. If you did miss it, we explored 16 potential root causes for a lack of storage capacity in the warehouse. It's consistently one of the more popular editions that we've done to date. You'll find a link to that video in the description below. Make sure to check that one out after. Okay, so on to our topic at hand, a new DC activation gone wrong. This is an important one. Now, if you're watching this as an experienced distribution professional, whether you're an executive or an operator, regardless of whether you've been a part of a failed activation or even a failed expansion or mass reslot, for that matter, you'll understand the importance of avoiding it at all costs. There are few occurrences more disruptive and expensive than a failed DC activation. And I'm not just referring to the worst case scenario where the activation is a complete failure and the building is full even before you move half your items in. I'm also talking about the suboptimal activations where the building was sized improperly, slotted improperly, or set up with the wrong equipment altogether. Even if you don't notice it right away, improper setups will slowly drain your productivity, lower order throughput, and ultimately increase your distribution costs unnecessarily. Ideally, when you're activating a new DC, you're not just going to settle for a successful project. That should be a given. You'll also want to grow into your facility the right way and to maximize the return on your investment over time. So without further ado, let's get into our first fishbone category. As always, we'll begin with people. Inadequate coordination between project personnel. The site activation is one of the more complex, expensive, and time-intensive projects that a warehousing and distribution professional will undertake in their careers. It's a type of project that only potentially spans years, depending on the level of complexity. But these types of projects typically require large teams comprised of people with lots of different skill sets and experience levels. A lack of coordination or communication between team members could potentially cause design errors, installation delays, or more. And trust us, we've seen it all. Choose your key project members carefully and ensure they have the right tools right from the get-go, the right authority, and the right resources to complete the job effectively. Key employee turnover between planning and activation. Even when you do choose your project team wisely, you always must be prepared for potential turnover of key project members or skill sets. As these types of projects have the potential to span a significant amount of time, turnover is unfortunately a reality for most of them. Having a key resource leave mid-project doesn't just leave you having to replace an important part of the team. It can also cause continuation issues should the new resource not be onboarded properly or not be in total agreement with what's been done up to that point in the project. The same could be said for project members with conflicting priorities. Ensure your key resources can devote their full attention to the success of the project from start to finish. Activation plan not followed properly. Surprisingly, or maybe not so surprisingly, this is more common than it really should be. And it's not to say that your project or operations team would knowingly ignore the activation plan or cut corners. There are obvious issues with that approach. After all, who has ignored an instruction manual only to come back to it when things start going sideways? I'm more referring to flaws in the activation plan itself, or the presence of a plan in the first place. You've no doubt heard the common saying that most car accidents happen close to home. Well, applied to this situation, it also has some truth. The reality is that we do tend to let our guard down the closer we get to our comfort zone, no matter how experienced our operators are or how well the project has gone to that point. Do not ignore the importance of a well-planned and meticulous activation plan, especially if systems and automation are involved. The more complex a system or layout, the higher the chance you will encounter issues during the implementation, so plan accordingly. Moving on to equipment. Equipment does not match requirements. This is one of the more common occurrences when it comes to site activations. It doesn't always cause notable issues right away, although sometimes it does, but it has the potential to throttle productivity, order throughput, and operating capacity slowly but consistently until it does become noticeable months or even weeks after the initial activation. By the time you do notice it, it's likely eroded your return on investment and potentially reduced the lifetime of your building. Equipment might be the easiest way to cut costs during a new build, especially if you're moving into a building that comes with racking already installed. Before you start counting your savings, however, make sure to compare the dollars saved today against the unnecessary dollars spent potentially in the years to come. You'll find that it's much more lucrative to get the design and equipment right from the beginning. Equipment not installed properly. Unfortunately, even if you do choose the equipment that matches your requirements, there's still a chance it can be installed improperly or not according to the installation plan. If this is a measuring or incorrect dimension issue, it can be catastrophic. As the old carpentry proverb says, measure twice, cut once. Significant or unexpected installation delays. One of the reasons these types of projects must be planned so far in advance is the long lead times for equipment. As the project lead or project sponsor, the last thing you want to have to deal with is a delay in receiving or installing equipment. Although site activations can take over a year to properly plan, as we mentioned before, the actual execution usually happens over the course of a couple of days. For most operations, a delay or even a day or 2 days or a week can cost millions of dollars. Going back to the first point, though delays are costly, you don't want to have to choose equipment based on which has the shortest lead time, so do plan accordingly. On to process. Conceptual design is not backed by operational data. It may sound obvious, but if your conceptual facility design is not based on your own operational data with as few assumptions as possible, your project is destined to fail. Now, of course, you would never size and design a multi-million-dollar distribution facility without some data. The real question is, what data are you using, and how relevant is it to this operation? If you're relying on averages, your data is not current, or you're using incorrect samples or projections altogether, you could be setting yourself up to fail before you even break ground or sign a lease. Inadequate coordination between planning and implementation. This is one that we unfortunately see quite a bit. As I mentioned previously, these projects can be quite lengthy. Between the initial planning and the final design implementation, you're likely looking at over a year. Of course, depending on the size and complexity of the build. In that length of time, many things can happen. We already discussed a few of them, including key employee turnover, equipment delays, and other things. However, if there are no unexpected issues, if the final site design and ultimate implementation does not follow the planning work, for one, what did you spend all the time planning for? And second, what's the design based on? Poor analysis of operational trade-offs between functions. This one goes back to not only the use of correct operational data, but the proper analysis of the data itself. After all, data is nothing on its own. It's only useful if you're able to derive the right intelligence from it. Ultimately, when you're using operational data to size a facility, you should be using projected active SKU counts, expected shipping volumes, expected inventory, and things like that in order to arrive at the proper sizing and material handling options, among other things. But you should also be using this data to estimate your future productivity levels, order throughput, selection travel, etc. Ultimately, there's not just one correct size for your operation. To be fully optimized, you need to be looking at what kind of layout maximizes your operating capacity and your direct labor. For example, if you build a layout that maximizes product on the floor, you may save on replenishments and other forklift labor on the inbound side, but the unnecessary increase in selection travel could not only wipe out the savings completely off the board, but could cost you even more, and you could end up having a full facility before you expected. Looking at environment, unexpected equipment and project cost increase. Like unexpectedly long lead times, cost increases or costs that are just not accounted for are an unfortunate reality for these kinds of projects. Really, the only uncertainty is not if you will encounter unexpected costs, it's how much costs were unaccounted for. Unaccounted for costs are obviously never a great thing for a project. However, there's usually a threshold of what's acceptable and what will ultimately require a pivot in one direction or another. Unfortunately, these pivots are usually last-minute design or equipment changes that throw a wrench into the plan implementation. Always make sure unexpected costs and risks are accounted for, but more than that, before you make a pivot, be sure to weigh the costs and risks of the pivot itself. You could be surprised at how much straying from your original design will end up costing you in the years to come. Unexpected space constraints. Now, barring any measurement oversights, unexpected space constraints should be rare, though they do occur. Although faulty growth projections that result in your space filling up quicker than expected technically fits under this category, I'm going to keep it at the physical constraints for now. This would be in reference to things like roof tilts, sprinkler heads, lighting systems, ceiling fans, piping, building faults, etc. Make sure you understand these constraints right away and plan around them. And lastly, facility size does not meet requirements. This one is self-explanatory for the most part. Of course, your facility should meet your requirements, right? Well, how many of you listening to this video right now know someone who has signed a 5 to 10 year lease before really knowing what the requirements are? If you've done it yourself, don't worry, you have company. We've seen it time and time again. Obviously, building inventory plays a role in this, and location, of course, and maybe you do have to adjust your design to whatever is available. But the point is, do it before you sign a lease. Once you sign on the dotted line, you're bending your operation to the facility and not the other way around. Next up is management. Inadequate dedication of project resources. We touched on this one a little at the beginning, but this is more for the executives out there who are responsible for putting the project teams together and allocating the right number of resources. These types of projects are resource intensive and require the right skills and attention. Even then, your success is not guaranteed. Just make sure your project has a chance to succeed from the beginning by putting together the proper skill sets and providing your team with the time and resources they need. Missing or inadequate activation plan. Again, we touched on this a little under the people category. If you're listening to this as a distribution executive, it may not be your responsibility to create and carry out your activation plan, but it is your responsibility to ensure your team has one to begin with. Even if your project has gone better than you expected up to that point, without an effective activation plan, your implementation team will be completely in the dark and they'll be forced to improvise wherever proper instructions are lacking. Lack of coordination between project teams. And again, we talked about the lack of coordination between project personnel, but how about the lack of coordination between project teams? With these types of projects, there may be a central leadership team, but there will be multiple teams of people, experience and skills that need to come together and work in parallel for the project to be an ultimate success. You'll have executives, you'll have analysts, you'll have operations personnel, engineers, vendors, and maybe even consultants working towards the same goal and on the same timeline. Any ambiguity or lack of coordination on dates or expectations could result in delays, design flaws, unexpected costs, or worse. Last but certainly not least, tools. Insufficient data for requirement planning. We talked about the importance of using correct and relevant operational data for requirement planning. Having data and not using it is one problem. Not having the data is another story altogether. Ultimately, where there is a gap in data, assumptions or guesstimates are made. Sometimes there's no way around it. It's important, however, to understand what was based on real data and what was assumed or guesstimated so that you can plan and assess potential risks accordingly. Lack of data analysis and modeling capabilities. We all know the popular expression of back of the napkin calculation, which is another way of saying a quick ballpark estimate. If you are okay with relying on this method or are planning on relying on this method to design your next site, be prepared for the project to fail and fail badly. If you're here watching this video, however, I'm sure you'd never think of doing that. But what about the well-crafted spreadsheet? We've seen some good ones in the past, and we've worked with a lot of smart engineers and operators who have executed well with some interesting homegrown tools. However, even the most well-crafted spreadsheet is still only a spreadsheet. A spreadsheet is not data analysis, is not a data analysis or modeling tool, especially not for a site design or activation project. If you've ever had a folder with 20 spreadsheets in it and only 2 computer screens with which to view all of them at the same time, you kind of know what I'm talking about. Or if you've ever missed a formula or had to wonder if you had the most recent version of a document, you get my point. Inadequate conceptual design tools. Similar to the point above, beyond data analysis and modeling, having the right conceptual design tools that allow you to take the next step by providing actionable and comparable design concepts based on your data analysis and projections is key. And it's not just about having the concepts to compare and ultimately move forward to the more detailed design phase, it's about continuation. We talked about the disconnected project teams, but what about the disconnected process? Your conceptual design should be based off your data, analysis and models, and your detailed design should be based off your conceptual design. Any weak link or disconnect in the process could result in disaster. And there you have it, a root cause analysis for a new DC activation gone wrong. And once again, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you are interested in staying tuned to this expanded continuous improvement series and other great content, do also hit that subscribe button. We're uploading actionable content just like this each and every week. It really helps us grow the channel and, of course, to get this information out there to people who need it. Finally, if you'd like to find out how our fulfillment optimization system, SKUstream, can help you properly plan, effectively size, and activate your new distribution center or expansion area, be sure to check out our website at www.synccontext.com. Avoiding the potential root causes that we discussed in this video sometimes requires more than just being aware of them. The tools you use, especially in data-intensive projects like this, where there's a thin margin for error, could make the difference between success and failure. I've included a link in the description below. Also, feel free to email us at info@synccontext.com with any questions you may have. As always, if you can think of any more potential root causes for a DC activation gone wrong, be sure to leave your comments below. Also, if this helped you proactively uncover and mitigate potential failure points within a project that you're currently working on, please also do let us know in the comments. We love hearing your success stories. Until next time, my name is Robbie Cluett, VP of Business Development and Customer Success for SyncContext Supply Chain. Thanks for watching.